What it do? Crispy Crew. Read the title of this video and probably read and seen the thumbnail. Jcole has finally released his long-awaited final album, The Fall Off. Now, for people who don't already know, this is his last album ever. This is the last time he's doing any type of music. This is the last time, well, at least from a rapping standpoint. Who knows, he might still be producing some songs here and there, but as we know it, as we know it, this man is done rapping. A lot of mixed feelings on Jcole's career, let alone Jcole's stances in music. Unfortunately, how he played in the Drake and Kendrick beef, when I really feel like it should have been avoided entirely, because it's not really in his character to be out here making diss tracks. But then again, I don't know these people. That's very pure social. Generally though, I think we're just gonna dive right into this. This album, in my personal opinion, was phenomenal. My predictions for this album was more of the aspect of this was going to be an album that genuinely set the record for lyricism in hip-hop, at least. And I believe that this album showcases that almost perfectly. So I kind of want to just get right into it. So with that being said, if you like these type of videos where I break down hip-hop, anime, film, anything, be sure to like the video and subscribe. Also be sure to sub up to the live channel and my Twitch. I'll be streaming on there from time to time. That will also be linked within the description. Jcole, the lyricist you are. I'm so impressed by the longevity. Let me start by saying this. Let me start by saying that I'm very impressed by the longevity that Jcole had in his career. And so far, it's going to be very hard for anyone in this decade to top this album, because people don't realize we are 6 years into the 2020s decade. And so far, the best albums we've heard have come from people who've dominated the decade previously. The first half of the album, Jcole perspective seems to be one of him being about 29 years old, and he's returning back to his hometown. It's about a lot of previous relationships that he's had with a plethora of different people. The first half of the album being perspective, him returning back to Forest Hills Drive, you know, and a lot of the stories that he's talked about in previous albums have been elaborated within these songs on the first half. It's stuff ranging from stories about previous beefs he had with seemingly wannabe fake gangsters and drug dealers, all the way to past romantic relationships that were causing disappointment amongst himself from the lack of evolution amongst of his people, feeling that they are regressing rather than evolving. And that's just a general vibe that I got from it. And I believe that Jcole is, even though there is some songs on there that I would say he tries to socially, not push boundaries, but socially reflect upon himself and the folks around him. There is still criticisms that can be made, because let's just talk about the song Safety for a second. Within this song, he's talking about somebody in his neighborhood who eventually came out to be transgender, but decided to do that away from his hometown, from what I remember, in Atlanta. Now, the reason why this track kind of leaves a sour taste, because I'm not even going to say it's not a good track, because I get what he's saying, but it's unfortunately the same issue we have with Kendrick Lamar's Auntie Diaries, if you remember that song. You know, the song where he dropped the F slur a couple times. Jcole didn't drop the F slur, but it was very hard for him to convey his feelings without sounding completely bigoted. I know it's kind of a nitpick. He could have phrased this so much better. And you would think that someone of Jcole's lyrical ability would be able to do that, but I don't know, for some reason he kind of just blanked on that here. Though, the first disc of the album is a very interesting collection of songs. While I admit I am still connecting the full story, but it seems mainly involving his return to his hometown. And that's kind of just what it seems like. He's finishing up things one way or another. Not necessarily like holding on to like previous things, but resolving the issues within his return back home. However, focusing on a sound standpoint for a split second, J. Cole kind of proved that within the bag that he's kind of most known for, that he is still one of the greatest within that aspect, for lack of better terms. People don't remember that J. Cole does produce his own music. So a lot of the production that's on here that's reminiscent of J. Cole's old music is very much intentional. I believe the first disc of the album was supposed to represent previous times of his life, so it was bringing much like a rewind, for lack of better terms, and I feel like the production reflected that very much perfectly. But not only that, I think it kind of like also got a little experimental with some of the other styles that he had. Whatchamacallit, very prime examples being, songs like The Let Out. The Let Out being a very perfect example where it kind of felt like it was a Western standoff kind of beat, for lack of better terms. Like, like the old Western movies, like before the cowboys would walk up to each other and decide to do a quick draw. The instrumental genuinely gave off those type of vibes. And the vocal styles that J. Cole decided to switch to for these songs actually reflected that perfectly, in my personal opinion. I personally believe it's great experimentation on J. Cole's end. And honestly, it kind of reminds me of certain aspects of Kanye before, that man went insane. It went on his Nazi shit. Something tells me it's going to be the most overlooked part of the album is his production. Something just tells me that people are just going to just completely skip over the fact of how great the production is. But I guess this isn't really necessarily about anyone else's opinion. It's really just about mine. So I'm just going to keep that vault in here for a separate video, because I've already seen a couple of the takes people had on this album, and I kind of want to respond to a few of them, but let me collect those first before I decide to make a video about that. Or I might end up just making it on stream. We'll figure it out in a different day. Or just any type of takes that I have on this album. It's very hard for me to make any takes without it sounding like complete recency bias. Like the song The Villist is genuinely one of my favorite songs out of J. Cole's entire discography. And I believe that I don't want to stamp that just yet, because I kind of want to do a re-listen of J. Cole's whole discography after, some times went by, so I don't have the recency bias of the statement. But at the very minimum, if we put recency bias aside, this is genuinely one of my favorite songs that I've heard J. Cole release in ever. Now, by no means is this album perfect, in my opinion, but it's hard for me to communicate my flaws without it sounding like nitpicks. Mainly the songs about love. He made a lot of love songs. They were very heartfelt. But the issue is, they don't necessarily, there's a word that I'm looking for. Well, I'm not going to say that they're boring, but the vocal style is not necessarily too interesting, if that makes sense. It kind of feels like something J. Cole's already done before. But once again, this kind of sounds like a nitpick, for me at least, because they're not even necessarily bad songs. They're just kind of, it feels very repetitive, because he has multiple on there. The whole second half of the album, while it's telling his story about him becoming a 39-year-old man, starting a family, and his wife, which I get it, I guess the sound, sonically, it kind of just didn't hit all the way. Not even just from a production standpoint, but from genuinely how he was laying his vocals on the track. But once again, that kind of seems like a nitpick, so I'm not going to harp too much on that flaw. And I know a lot of people will just be like, oh, this nigga just hate love. The opposite, actually. But I feel the features and production kind of do a lot of heavy lifting here for the love songs on the album. Burna Boy, while I disagree with a lot of things he says and does, had a beautiful verse on Only You. The outro to the same song is some strong spoken word that I'm glad was included at the end. Another nitpick, unfortunately, is Man Up Above. this song was questionable because the verse wasn't bad. Like the verses, he had very strong verses here, but the chorus was so weak to me. And not only was the chorus weak to me, I believe that the sample was not used in the best way. Like the great, like the sample was never could have made it, you know? Never could have made it without you. I'm stronger, I'm wiser. But no, that was basically the song that he was sampling. And while I got the purpose of it, giving the story that he was telling within his song, it was I just believe the sample was very executed poorly. But then again, this kind of feels like a nitpick because of my personal relationships with the song that was already sampled. And I kind of want to make sure that like I'm laying out any biases before I decide to, like, you know, put my full stamp on my opinion on it, you know what I'm saying? But at least ignoring that though, we've seen Cole do better, but I don't know, I guess I'm just, it still feels like a nitpick for even me to include that in the video, I'm gonna be honest. But I'm gonna be honest, my standout tracks on this song would definitely be the 3-song run on the start of the second disc, 39 intro, The Fall Off is Inevitable, and The Villist. While on the first disc, Poor Thing, Bunts Road Blues, and Drum and Bass are other good tracks on the album as well. I really do not like giving a number ratings to album, but if I had to give this one a number rating, it would be a solid 9 out of 10. For a lot of my thoughts on it are still kind of like boiling over, so who knows, I might end up making more videos about specific songs in later aspects of just time in general. But as it stands right now, like, this might be one of the best albums I've heard from J. Cole. I don't know if it's the absolute best. I feel like with time, it has the potential for it to grow on me in the way to do just that, to be the best album that he's dropped. But I don't know. Let me know what y'all think. What do y'all think is some of the best tracks on the album if y'all have listened to it? And if you have not listened to it, I say go for it. I personally say that because I feel like in terms of hip-hop, this album would kind of represented what we needed, which was just stark lyricism, you know, because Kendrick ain't dropping in a minute. And ever since he did drop, yeah, he did have his lyricism, but I think J. Cole, Kendrick, and even Drake is kind of communicating to the audience they're not going to be here forever. J. Cole's case, he just got up. He's just getting up out of here. Kendrick, we don't know how much time he has left because that man be disappearing off the face of the earth. We have no idea if he's going to stay around any much longer than he already has. Drake seems like he's going to drag his career, but the way things are moving right now, it's probably best for him to hang it up while his career is the way it is currently. The big three from that generation, the blog era, is, I would say, officially over, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, it hasn't been the blog era for a very long time, but like the biggest stars from that era are finally kind of coming to a close within their active careers. So I'll say that, I don't know. Let me know what y'all think about the album. Let me know if there's any points that I said here that y'all personally disagreed with. With that being said, once again, follow the Twitch down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Like the video. And yeah, I'm gonna have to catch y'all later.